Much. It's good being here. We had a lot of fun yesterday trying to play golf, and I told Larry I would talk about him. Larry Lynch was in our foursome. His job was to take care of us, and he really did. He said two things about my golf play. Thank heavens your wife is here. She has a wonderful swing. She actually is too darn good. Her nickname for me is ATM. We play for money, and she takes it. She's very good. And he said, and he reminded me again this morning, you have great potential to be a good golfer someday. And you know things are bad when you're in a tournament and one of your partners is saying, well, could you wait a minute? Let me tell you what you need to do so this ball does not go into deep water versus standing water. But I must tell you, it was an exciting experience. I'm from Texas. I was checking as we were standing under a patio balcony looking at the rain and looking at waterfalls coming off the side of a green. I was checking the weather in Austin, Texas, and yesterday was 104 degrees, so I stopped complaining about being in this nice, cool weather. Well, we're going to talk about a lot of things, and I'm really honored to have a chance to be here. What I do for a living is scare my students and scare my audiences. But now that we have this great MC, I don't have to worry about anything. There's nothing I can do that can touch him. He's an amazing man. But I'm going to talk about some changes that are going on in the world and how they are directly relevant to you folks in Tallahassee. And the first half of my talk is going to talk about how this world that we're in is changing in a way nobody could have imagined 5 or 10 years ago. But these changes are going to have a direct impact on all of us. In the second half of my talk, I'm going to talk about some communities, with the last one being Austin, Texas, that have taken advantage of what's going on to try to change who and what they are. And it's an interesting story. And then we will end with some questions about what you in Tallahassee are going to do. And I have a couple of videos, just in case you get bored, that will pop up from time to time. In fact, I don't know where they are, and so it'll probably surprise me. So let's get started. One of the great things about being trapped with some friends that you've never met before in a rainstorm is that they tell you a lot about a lot of things. And so here's some questions that I have for you. Because I'm from Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas has a lot in common with Tallahassee. We're a state capital. We have a great state university. At one point, we were in serious trouble. And hopefully you don't have the challenges that we had when I first came to Austin in 1989. But my question, first one is, do I need to raise this? All right. I saw her coming, so that meant one of two things. I see it. Either I have to raise this or it's already over. She's coming to get me. You are the best looking hook I've seen in a long time. It's over. Okay. Sorry about that. We're supposed to be serious, but after our MC, how can you be serious? There's some people who think the good times are just around the corner. Okay? That if we just hold on to what we've been doing in the past, guess what? Things are going to work out. This is just a temporary cycle. Those are the same people who thought that when the starter at the golf tournament said, you know, the major rain is over. Once you get out there, there'll just be a couple of pop-ups and you'll be fine. And 40 minutes into a pop-up that was, you know, I've never been at a golf course where the golf carts disappeared underwater. And I said, you know, if this is a pop-up, I don't want to be here when you have a serious storm. But what if this is not just a minor deviation in the norm? What if we're in the middle of a strategic inflection point, something that's major, something that's significant, something that represents a change forever? What do we do? Andrew Grove was the founding CEO of Intel. In 1995, he wrote a book about the culture of Intel called Only the Paranoid Survive. Now, what's interesting about that book is that when it was published, Intel, the big semiconductor company, owned 70% of the return on investment of the global semiconductor industry. And they were paranoid. They are paranoid today, which is why they continue to dominate their industry. And one of the things I've learned in talking with my former students who are at Intel and working with people in their industry who try to compete with Intel is that if you have a company that is always paranoid, always convinced that somebody is getting ready to come over their shoulder and do bad things to them, guess what? You run as hard as you can, you work as hard as you can, and you never rest. What I've seen in working around the world, and I've worked in 29 countries around the world with communities in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in the Caribbean, in South America, Central America, and in the US, is that the cities and communities that do the best, that thrive, are cities and communities that never, ever rest. That institutions that do the best and thrives are institutions that never, ever rest. And so we're going to talk about why that makes sense. I have a quote from this book talking about strategic inflection points. And strategic inflection points are rare events. They are things that happen that tell you the world as we understand it is never going to be the same. That some fundamental things have happened that have changed everything that makes sense. You know, I really like this stage. You know, it kind of feels like you're on a boat, which is fine. I'm used to being on boats, but it's just the sound. I hope you can't hear the sounds we go back and forth. You can hear the sound. Okay, so let me see. You know, and the other thing I love is having an absolutely clear plexiglass podium. Make sure everything's in good shape. I have since our MC got us going in the wrong direction, I have a bad joke to share. I just started teaching at the University of Texas at Austin, the business school. I taught one course a semester at the beginning. And I taught a class, and since it was one course, I'd do it in the evening so I could run my consulting business. And I taught a 3-hour class, and I thought it was a good class. And 3 co-eds came up to me and they said, "Professor Doggett?" I said, "Yes." "Do you know your fly's open?" I said, "Aye!" And I said, "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" And they said, "Well, we wanted to see how excited you got with what you're teaching." I kid you not. And I'm glad I wasn't excited that day. Otherwise, this would be a video conference from the Travis County Jail or some other place. But a strategic inflection point, let me give you a sense. Let me make it personal. A strategic inflection point is what it would be like if you went to bed tonight with your spouse and you woke up in the morning with somebody else. Somebody sounds happy about that idea. But it's that big. It's that significant. This is what we're talking about. A young man was standing on his apartment in a small village in Japan. He heard the tsunami sirens. He went out with his camera because he said, "Our government has spent tens of billions of dollars building seawalls. So when a tsunami comes, it is channeled." And what he saw was that the seawall did not fail and that it was not destroyed, but it didn't work. And you can see a few cars there. There were people in those cars, and the people in those cars died. A tsunami and a strategic inflection point are the same. The difference between a strategic inflection point is that it's like a tsunami that does not stop. And that's where we are, in my opinion, my friends. This is a picture of a police officer, Sheriff. A human being trying to protect the people of Athens, Greece. This picture was taken in 2009. Or I could have picked up a picture just like this in 2010, or 2011, or 2012. Why is that important? Athens is the heart, the homeland, the birthplace of Western civilization, and Athens is burning. In fact, Greece is burning. And we've heard about it. In 2009, there was a worry that the European Union might collapse, the value of the euro. I have to stand like this, okay? The value of the euro would go down because of Greece. That was 2009, and we worried about it in 2010, 2011. We're still worried about Greece. Why is Greece such a concern, and why should you care in Tallahassee? If you look at this, this is a chart. Oh, that's nice. I hear a nice sound. Is that me? Okay, just making sure. A new way to pull me off the podium. If you look at that chart, that looks at the performance of deposits in Greece since the beginning of 2011. And what's going on? People are pulling their money out. Why? They're absolutely convinced that the Greek government will eventually not be able to support its economy. They'll be kicked out of the euro. And when that happens, the government will freeze all deposits in Greek banks and convert them to drachmas, which was the old currency they had before the European Union invited them in. And they're afraid that that conversion rate will be meaningless because nobody will accept drachmas outside of Greece. And so they're pulling their money out. It's not just Greece, we're seeing that. They're putting them in other banks where they can keep their euros. What happens to a community? What happens to the business community when depositors are pulling their money out of banks? How can banks make loans? Second slide. This compares the Greek version of the Dow Jones with the Dow Jones at the beginning of the Great Depression in October of 1929. The Dow Jones from October 1929 to the depth of the Depression is the line in red. The blue line is the Greek version of it. What's going on in the stock market in Greece is worse than what we experienced in the height of our depression. There is no question, in my opinion, that it's just a question of time before Greece finally leaves the Eurozone. May stay in the European Union, but leaves the Eurozone. Why are people worried? They're worried that if Greece goes, that will pull Spain and Italy down. Why is that important? In the first quarter of this year, depositors in Spain took enough money out of Spanish banks to equal 10% of the country's GDP, almost 100 billion euros. How do you loan money to small and medium-sized businesses if you are losing that much money in the banking system? The problem is very simple. If you look at this chart, in the middle is Greece. Next to it is Spain, with about twice the much sovereign debt in the leading banks in Europe, and then there's the big dog, Italy. There simply is not enough money in Europe to bail out Greece, Spain, and Italy. And the worry about Greece is that if they don't figure out a way to solve the problem with Greece, it'll pull Spain down, and if Spain is pulled down, the contagion will pull Italy down. And what we're seeing right now are hundreds of millions of euro moving to the United States out of Europe on a daily basis because people are afraid that this is going to happen. Because the estimate of how much it would take to bail out the Spanish and Italian economies is about 1.6 trillion euros. And there's not enough money for that. The banks don't have it. And so when you read about what's going on in Spain as their interest rates go up, you read about the worries about Italy, the worries about Ireland, the worries about Portugal, and what's going on in Greece, understand, if Europe collapses, as many of us fear it might, if it's already in a very deep recession, especially the UK, which is hosting the Olympics, but if Europe collapses, temporarily it'll be very good for us because a lot of money will flow into the United States, our interest rates will go down even lower for our government securities. Unless, of course, you sell products to Europe. Unless, of course, you have imports from Europe. For those of you who own BMWs or Mercedes or Audis, guess what's going to happen to the cost of spare parts? It's going to affect us. And I'm a firm believer that if you see bad things happening, you have two choices. You can either say, I don't want to see it, or what do we do about it? How do we prepare for it? How do we take advantage of it? In fact, I'm a firm believer that the worse things get, the greater opportunity there are for people who are not afraid of strategic inflection points. Because what most people do when they face a strategic inflection point is they act like an ostrich. I don't want to believe that things are changing that much, so maybe if I don't say it's happening, it'll stop. And what I've seen in the work I've done around the world is that companies that say, I see what's happening, I take it seriously, and I'm going to prepare for it, those are the companies that take advantage of it, and your city can. The challenge that Europe faces is very simple. If you look at this chart, in 2010, 70% of all growth in Europe was from one country, Germany. By 2011, it was down to 55%, and now I'm talking to people from Germany and following data from Germany. They believe the German economy is almost in stall mode. What happens if the economic engine of Europe starts to stall? And that's what's going on. And what we know is the same thing is happening in China. Growth in China is going down. Growth in India is going down. These were the three most dynamic economies in the world from a growth standpoint, and they are all going in one direction. Now, I'm a firm believer, let me see if I can stand like this without scaring you. I'm a firm believer in looking at what is and calling it for what it is. And the term I use are ugly baby glasses. We've all seen ugly babies. We've all seen them. Some of them never grow up, do they? But we've seen ugly babies, and what do we do when we see parents and they have a baby and it's really ugly? We say, oh, what a cute little baby. Normally I use somebody as a prop for this, but they said, you don't even try that with us, so I'm going to stand up here. Oh, what a cute little baby. It's so wonderful. That's what we tell the mother and father, and what we're thinking is, who's the daddy? Can't be him. And we hope it looks better when it grows up. But if you're serious about business, if you're serious about your community, if you're serious about competition, you have to put your ugly baby glasses on first and say, this is what's going on. You may not like it. It may be horrible. But you got to see it and call it for what it is. And then you put on your value judgment glasses, the glasses that reflect what you believe and what you want to have happen. What I see all over the world is that most people, when they are looking at bad news, they start with these. Oh man, that's pretty cool. It's not that bad. That is a recipe for disaster. Ugly baby glasses are at the heart of what it takes to be a successful business. Think about Intel. They're paranoid. They literally are paranoid. They're convinced that if they don't keep running as hard as they can, they will cease to exist in 2 years. And they have a reason to be paranoid. A lot of us have iPads. One of our friends works for Intel. And he's in the product design side of Intel because my wife's a senior product planner for Dell. And he was telling me about a meeting they had, an all-hands meeting where the chief technical officer of Intel asked all of his people either to be in an auditorium or be online. And he walked into the room and he held up an Apple iPad. He said, you all know what this is. It's a great device. It does not have Intel inside. That's how we make money. If Intel's not inside and this device represents the future of computing, we're in trouble. And then he said, we've taken this device apart, which is kind of hard because there are no screws, but we figured out how to take it apart. We've looked at the chip, and that chip does everything you'd expect a chip to do for a device of this size, with two minor details. It is half the size and has half the transistors of our most advanced product for a device of this size. And it was not designed by us. It was designed by Apple. It's Apple inside. And in fact, what had happened was 4.5 years ago, Apple bought a fabless semiconductor company. These are people who design chips and then send it out to be made by somebody else. They brought it in-house. And if you have an Apple iPhone 4 or 4S or an iPad 2, you're using chips that were designed in-house by Apple. All the evidence shows that this is what's going on with the PC business, and this is what's going on with the tablet business. And for Intel, Intel's not inside. Well, the good news is that since they were paranoid and have always been paranoid, they are working night and day to try to figure out how to do something about it. And one of the things they're doing is getting involved in smartphone chips. But you would think a company that had 70% of the return on investment for the global semiconductor industry would be complacent. They are not. And we can't be either. But here's the most frightening chart with data about Europe that I've ever seen. It looks at the unemployment rate for people 25 years and younger. And in Greece and in Spain, it is over 51%. Which means when you graduate from college, when you graduate from high school, the chances of you having a job are 50% at best. And I heard an interview with a young Spanish engineer. He'd graduated. He was working for free in an internship because he didn't want to stay at home. And he said, my greatest hope is that I can immigrate to Argentina or Chile in South America because there are no jobs for me in Spain. This picture is coming to this country because of the level of debt we've allowed our kids to have for school, for college. Student loans have now passed $1 trillion. Why is that important to us? we all remember, whether you're from Texas, from Florida, or Arizona, what happened with subprime. In subprime, personal indebtedness of Americans went up 3x before everything blew up. At the same time, subprime is going up 3x in terms of the personal indebtedness of people owning homes. Student loan indebtedness was going up 6x. 6 times. Now think about what that means. When you have kids graduating with $80, $90, $100, $120,000 worth of debt, what do? They go home to live with their parents if they can. What don't they do? They don't get married. They don't rent apartments. They don't buy cars. They don't have children. They don't buy homes. They don't do all the things that young people have to do to continue to keep the economy growing. And they don't do that because they can't afford to. And that's with our economy as robust as it is right now. What if our economy slows down? If you listen to Romney or Obama, the other party is run by idiots who are dangerous. If you put on your ugly baby glasses, it's not about parties. It's about our belief that we can spend more than we can take in, and that's fine. In fact, traditional economists have told government leaders all over the world that as long as you don't spend more than 3% more than you take in, you can do that forever. Now, I've had a consulting business, been a partner in a TV, sports production business. So I've run businesses, in addition to practicing law and being a professor. And I'll tell you, I've never seen a banker would be willing to tell me that as long as I only ran a 3% deficit forever, I'd be fine. It just doesn't work. But we've been trying to do that. And here's the problem. If you look at it, there have been 2 times since the end of World War II where we've run a profit on our economy. Brief time with President Eisenhower, brief time with President Clinton. What's the problem? It's getting worse. It's getting worse. Our tax income coming in is pretty much the same, but our spending is going up and up and up. Now, I was born and raised in California. I'm proud to call myself a Texan now. And so, let me tell you, one of my pieces of advice, I give you a little early warning of it, is California is going to do a lot to make Florida a better place. Because the people in California who are running the government, unlike your great public servants, they believe that the private sector is composed of evil people who are screwing the people and who are stupid. And so they should have no problem with their taxes going up, regulations going up, and the amount of money they extract from them going up. They're kind of like the new leader of France. He says, I believe in growth. He's actually said it in French, but I can't try that. I believe in growth, Monsieur Hollande. I believe in growth. We need to grow the economy. You know, this austerity gig doesn't work. So here's how we're going to grow the economy. Any one of you who makes more than €1 million, we're going to increase your tax rate to 75%. Now think about that. I mean, think about what that means. He actually believes that somebody making €1 million or more is going to wake up tomorrow, Monday, and say, let's see, you're going to take 75% of what I'm making. Fine. He believes that. Now let me tell you what's going on. High-end real estate brokers in England and Switzerland have said they've seen unprecedented demand from wealthy French people who are saying, we're getting out of this place. And again, early warning about later on. One of the greatest things that's happened in Austin is that our chamber has sent poaching delegations to California to talk to small, medium-sized business owners and say, why are you putting up with this crap? Come on to Austin. And we've had tremendous success with that. But it's not just Austin. I gave a speech in Boise, Idaho 3 years ago, and the Boiseans were complaining that there are so many people from California that soon there are going to be more Californians in Idaho than Idahoans, or whatever they call them, those people. Well, I guess they could call them Idahos, but that's their name. You see what happens when you have your MC? It goes south, and continues to get worse. But, you know, I have no bad pictures. But look at this data point. If we continue to take in taxes at the same rate that we've done and continuing to grow our entitlements, by 2049, entitlements will take up all of our tax revenue on the federal level. You know what we call that in Texas? What we say when we see something like that in Texas? We say, that dog don't hunt. This doesn't make any sense. And so we're going to have to figure out how to fix it, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But this is the strategic inflection point. Continuing to do what we've done in the past is not going to work. And that is the daily reading on the Bible today. Continuing to do what we've done before is not going to work. The only thing that all of us have to accept is we're going to have to change our music. Because look at this. This looks at deficit spending in this country since forever, 1791, since we've been a country. And if you look at the far, in your case, right, that shows the current level of deficit spending in America. It's equal to the peak of the Civil War. We are borrowing money to keep paying the bills at a level equal to what we were borrowing at the peak of the Civil War. Now, let me put that in context. By the end of the Civil War, we had our worst casualty of any war we fought, including World War II, Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and the First War combined. More than 600,000 Americans died in the Civil War. We've lost some brave men and women, some of whom I've met in Iraq and Afghanistan, about 6,500. I don't want to belittle their deaths. But in 1865, the population of America was 32.5 million people. Today it's 313 million people. And so if we were to take that 600,000 Americans who died at the hands of other Americans in 1865 and adjust it for 2012, the number is 4.7 million Americans died. 4.7 million Americans died. And we've lost about 6,500. We are spending, borrowed money as though 4.7 million Americans had died in the war, and that is not happening. And we're not worried about it. President Obama proposed the budget. I took a few pieces from what he proposed. Entitlements, Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security, defense. Sorry, the billion got confused with this, but that happens. But most importantly, interest on the public debt. Now here's a data point for you. Interest on the public debt today is about the same amount we paid in 2006. In 2006, we had $5 trillion left of debt. If interest rates go up, did I say if? When interest rates go up, we have two choices. We pay more, or we become a gigantic Greece and say we're not paying. If we pay more, then where's that money going to come from? It's going to come from other programs. If we say we're not going to do it, we're a gigantic Greece, the world goes not only into a deep recession, it probably goes into a depression. The chickens and the turkeys are getting ready to roost. And those of us who take this seriously with our ugly baby glasses are going to have a great opportunity to grow our economy a lot faster than some other places that are in denial. And my home state of California is the epicenter of denial. They literally believe that they can borrow their way out of things. And it's getting worse and worse. This is our job chart. I showed you one with Greece and Spain. Let me explain what this means. This looks at every recession since 1948. The 0% line tells you how many jobs an economy had when the recession started. And then how fast it goes down tells you how steep the recession was. At the bottom, that's the bottom of the recession. And when that line gets back up to 0, that means the economy has regained all the jobs that it lost since the beginning of the recession. That ugly, nasty line that's nowhere near 0 at the bottom is our current recession. The recession we are in today is the worst, the deepest, the most destructive recession we have had since 1948. Now, the politicians will tell you that, the folks in D.C., you have some good politicians here. The folks in D.C., I have to make a difference because, my friend over here, my new friend, is going to do something bad to me when I sit down. You're a state rep. The folks in D.C. would have you believe that the recession ended a couple years ago. It didn't end for our fellow citizens who still don't have jobs. And most of my economist friends say at the rate of economic growth, that line that represents this current recession will not get back to zero before the end of this decade. But there's still opportunities for us, which is why we send poaching delegations to California twice a year. Final bit of data to give you a sense of what's going on. This looks at garbage, carloads of garbage, of waste. And the waste production of America has an 82% correlation with the growth of our economy. That blue line is carloads of waste. And what we see is that's fallen off the table. Why is that important? You throw away what you buy. And if you're not buying stuff, you're not throwing away as much stuff. So this is an indicator that our economy is starting to slow down already. You hear a little from Washington about that. I guarantee you in February or March of next year, when either President Obama's reelected or President Romney, you're going to hear some really bad news from Washington saying, oops, just like we heard at the last election. Oops, actually the recession started a year before, right? But you're seeing the data. You've imported your own personal talking set of ugly baby glasses. The issue is, what do you do with that data? Because here's where we are, my friends. At the beginning of our century, this country owed $5.7 trillion to the rest of the world. Today, and I finalized this number at about 1 a.m. this morning, the number was almost $16 trillion. And if we continue to do what we've been doing, by 2016, at the current rate of spending, the number will be $22.2 trillion. Almost 4 times more than we owed at the beginning of the century. How many of you have bankers that will allow you to do this? And how many of your bankers could survive if all their customers did this? And why is it okay for Washington to do this? Who's responsible for those people being there? You and I. So one of my messages is very clear. We as a country have to put on ugly baby glasses and say, this has to stop. Because if it doesn't stop, we're going to blow up. We like to believe as Americans, and I believe that we're a special, God-blessed country, and we are. I've traveled all over the world, and God has truly blessed us. But God will not prevent us from being stupid idiots. That's not God's job. And if we want to be really dumb and take this gift and destroy it, who's going to pay the price? Who's going to pay the price? I have a video for you.
为什么强大的国家都会走向灭亡呢？古希腊、罗马帝国、不列颠帝国、美国，因为他们都犯同样的错误，与原来使得他们成功的原则背道而驰。美国政府企图以庞大的开支和税收来摆脱严重的经济衰退，巨额的所谓刺激开支。 庞大的医疗改革，政府接管私有企业，债务累累。当然，我们是他们的大债主。现在他们都得给我们干活。
You can change the future. You have to. Join Citizens Against Government Waste to stop the spending that is bankrupting America.
That ad ran before the 2010 election. It became a very controversial ad. A lot of people didn't like it. They thought it was race-mongering, the yellow peril. Let's look at the data. Let's put on ugly baby glasses. This is from the United States Department of Treasury. As of May of this year, the People's Republic of China owns $1.7 trillion of our government securities. And when you add their wholly owned subsidiaries, Hong Kong and Taiwan, we owe the Chinese $1.5 trillion. Let me put things in context. Our deficit spending last year was $1.4 trillion. That video was talking about what could happen in 2030. Today, our banker is the People's Republic of China. How did that happen? And why are we letting that happen? So what do we do? If this hasn't depressed you, I see he's going out to commit suicide right now. That's okay. Suicide's a bad thing. Don't do it. Come back. Part of the reason it happens is that while we have had an addiction to borrowing money and spending it, the Chinese, the communists, the folks who don't believe in God have had an addiction to saving money. My father is a Methodist minister, and I remember, the 7 lean years, the 7 good years. What do you do in the 7 good years? You prepare for what happened on the golf course yesterday, okay? You don't just spend it. I hear my friends at Florida State had an experience like that. They had a great cancer drug. A ton of money came into the school. Guess what happened? They spent it, and then the money stopped coming in. That's not what they teach us in the Bible. That's not what they teach us in private life. And that's what we've been doing in our country. The Chinese have been doing something different, and we have to change. Because the IMF says that sometime between now and 2016, China will become the largest economy in the world. And it's not their fault. They're just hustling. They're running. So what do we do? The most important thing we do that you don't hear very much out of our politicians on either side is that we have to grow our economy. We have to grow faster. A lot of our problems get self-corrected if we grow the economy. We're growing at about 1.5% now. What happens if we grow at 6%? Our tax revenues go up significantly, and if we hold the line on spending, what happens? We start to generate a surplus, and if we have intelligent people in Washington, D.C., as bright as the people you have here, guess what? We use that money to start to pay down the debt. But the other thing is, and I must say, this is really important, we have to be honest about taxes. If we run a business, which we do, and I have had a business and I still do consulting, it's very simple. If we spend more money than we take in, we go out of business. And if we can't increase our prices, then what we have to do is we have to decrease our costs. Well, there's some taxes that have to go up. I don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat. One of them is the fuel tax. Why do we collect fuel tax? So that we can invest in our infrastructure, our bridges, our dams, our roads. The fuel tax we pay is the same fuel tax that we paid since the federal government instituted in the early 1970s. It's a number. I think it's like 13.5 cents. It is not a percent. I remember when gasoline was 19.9 cents a gallon. That's how old I am. But we all remember when gasoline went under $1. Fuel tax has not changed. If we need money for infrastructure, the logical way to get it is to tax those who use that infrastructure. Second, Social Security. This year, the cap on Social Security payments, if you work, is $110,000. After $110,000, you don't pay anymore, and we all like that little bip we get in our pay. Here's the minor problem. We have a football coach. Everybody has a football coach. But our football coach is paid $5.2 million to coach football. What that means is Mac Brown is a good man. He's a good man. Somewhere on the 9th day or 8th day of January, he stops paying Social Security tax. And I know, because he only makes $5.2 million, that he really appreciates that little blip he gets in the salary when he stops paying Social Security tax. Now, what does that mean? My economist friends have said that if you took away the cap, with no other changes in Social Security, you'd extend its life 20 to 30 years. And I guarantee you, I would pay my bit. I would not notice it. And then finally, we need to have a more sane tax policy. I think it's, 17,000 pages? Nobody knows what's in it until you've done something bad and they come after you. And if we are going to raise income taxes, which is the way to raise revenue, I'm only going to support that if we tie it to reducing spending at the same amount, because we have to pay down that deficit. If America says, we're going to be like the Greeks for not paying it, this is going to be a very bad movie. So let's talk about some positive stuff. I've worked with countries, 25 countries around the world on economic development and how, and many of the countries I worked with had been under communist or socialist dictatorships, and they asked me to come in and help them think about how to be more market-oriented. But one of the most interesting experiences I had is when I was in the UK almost 18 years ago, talking with people from Wales. And they told me a fascinating story, which is part of the hope for all of us. They said, you know, we used to be a natural resources economy, mining, fishing, building ships, and that all fell apart. Our mines were too deep. We were losing money on every ton of coal that we took out, and Margaret Thatcher said, it doesn't make sense to lose money on every ton of coal. We're going to close those mines down. We're too small to compete with the Japanese or the Koreans or the Finns or the Danes for shipbuilding, so that industry collapsed. And fishing, well, guess what? Didn't work. And so we're looking at 16, 17, 18% unemployment. And our leaders said, what can we do? And this was right around the time the European Union was getting ready to go live. And what that meant was that wherever you are in the European Union, once you were in that country, you could export to any other part of the EU without tariffs or duties or any other problems. They said, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We're going to go after companies from foreign countries that would appreciate what it's like to live in Wales and then use Wales as the basis of, as their headquarters for all of Europe. And they decided, after doing a lot of research, that they were going to go after Japanese companies. And so we have the greatest opportunity because there's a lot of tension when Japanese executives come into mainland Europe. We're going to invite them with open arms. We're going to say, please come to Wales. We also know they love playing golf, and we're going to go to all our country clubs and say, you know, you're on the verge of dying because your members can't afford to pay. When Japanese executives come to your country club looking at what's going on, make it clear that you welcome them and you want them to be members. And oh, by the way, to make the Japanese families feel good, we're going to create classes in Japanese culture and Japanese all across Wales. They said that within 10 years, they turned their economy around. And by the mid-90s, they were looking at 6% unemployment. And they had more Japanese companies in Wales than any other part of the UK, in fact, any other part of Europe. And they had companies that said, our plan is to be here for 100 years. We love the fact that you love our being here. And we don't go as far in Austin as Japan. We just go to California. Well, sometimes it feels like you're going to Japan. But there are people who need what you have, who are not in your community, who can grow your community. And your job is to find them. How many of you have been to Spartanburg, South Carolina? A grand metropolis of 37,000 people. I gave a speech at Wofford College. It's a great school. Most of you have never heard of, but they almost beat University of Florida in football a few years ago, which should have been really a frightening experience for the coaches. But Spartanburg has nothing except an absolute dynamic, creative chamber of commerce that has done the same thing that Wales has done. In this small town, in this small county, which has the massive University of South Carolina upstate and Wofford College as its intellectual anchors, has attracted 80-plus international companies to open business in Spartanburg, including little minor ones like BMW, Milken, Michelin. And the New York Times said Spartanburg has more international investment on a per capita basis than any other city in America. And I've been to Spartanburg. They have a few stoplights in Spartanburg. But they have people who have said, we either are content to being 30 miles from Greenville and halfway in the middle of nowhere and nowhere, or we're going to make our place an exciting place for people from around the world to locate their headquarters. And you go in downtown Spartanburg, there's one building that has flags of all the countries represented in primarily manufacturing and in research in Spartanburg, and it's amazing. It's a mini UN. Spartanburg. My friends, if Spartanburg, South Carolina can do it, is there any excuse? Spartanburg. What do they have that Tallahassee doesn't have? Let me rephrase it. What does Tallahassee have that Spartanburg, South Carolina doesn't have? You got a lot. What's their strategy? They go after industries. They take advantage of a concept called clustering. We've all heard about clustering. You get 2 or 3 industries and 2 or 3 companies in one industry, and then a lot of other people want to be in that industry, and they've targeted automotive, plastics, metalworking, and distribution. They support their existing industries, and they say, don't you want to be part of this cluster? Come on over. They've invested, Spartanburg and Greenville have invested in their airport. It's a very nice airport. It's easy to get in and out. And what they've done, and sitting next to our photogenic superintendent of schools, and he is photogenic, by the way. You know, South Carolina has been, for a long time, viewed as one of the poorer states in the South, which means poor. But South Carolina's been doing a lot. In fact, Boeing wants to move aircraft manufacturing to South Carolina. And one of the things South Carolina and North Carolina have done that you and I and we can do is they have looked at their community colleges and they've said the community colleges are not for kids who haven't figured out what they want to do. Community colleges are an asset, a very important asset. And in North and South Carolina, their community colleges talk to employers and say, what do you want your people to know? We will create courses for you, for your people, so that we can feed talented, trained people into your job. You don't have to pay a penny for employee training. You tell us what you need, and we'll create programs for that. And we'll run programs for that. That's part of our incentive package for getting you here. And guess what? They've done an absolutely amazing job. In Texas, we're now looking at the same thing. One of my former friends, well, he's still a friend, but former colleagues, sold his energy company, his family energy company, for $750 million in 1993. And his passion now is education. And he's been trying to reform education in the state of Texas ever since. He's had some impact now, and he has this guy has this crazy idea. He thinks it should be possible for somebody to go to Texas A&M University or the University of Texas Austin for 4 years and pay only $10,000. That's insane, isn't it? Well, people thought it was insane, because remember what we talk about. When somebody says we need to change things, a strategic inflection point, my friend says, his name's Jeff Sandifer, he said, people can't afford to be humans if they graduate with $100,000 worth of debt. What would happen if they could go to a state institution for $10,000 for 4 years? And everybody says it's not possible. But he's pushed. You know, when you have $750 million, you can do a lot of pushing. He's pushed, and what's happened? We're now seeing a conversation, finally, a serious conversation in Texas about, well, there may be a way to substantially lower the cost of public education. I'd try to kill this fly, but I'd probably break everything here, so I'll just let it go. By combining community college and 4-year colleges. Who says that you have to go to Florida State or FAMU or University of Florida or Texas for 4 years if you can't afford to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt? Start your local community college, Tallahassee Community College, and then go to Florida State or FAMU. Substantially lower your costs, and you'll get a great education. That's radical. That's not the way things should be. But think about this. You're all business people, so you understand this. Go to your banker and say, I'm looking at potential income of about $2 million a year, and I want a loan for $5 million a year. But that's exactly what we do with our student loans. Our loan is based on need, and as long as you have need and you're willing to sign papers, you can borrow as much as you want, even though your degree might be in rhetoric. I'm not kidding you. I have a young lady, she's a work-study student in our office, and she's really nice, and she's getting a degree in rhetoric. How much do you make when you graduate from college with a 4-year degree in rhetoric? Not enough to pay back an $80,000 student loan. And so another radical idea is you tie the amount of money kids can borrow to what their major is. How much can they make when they graduate? And then a percentage of that can be borrowed. And if it's not enough, guess what? You got to figure out another way to pay for it. We don't do that. I'm sure it makes sense to somebody. But we got $1 trillion of student loan debt, and a lot of the students are like grease and not going to ever be able to pay it back. Well, that's frightening. It's probably one of your kids, right? Gainesville. Oh, I know it's nasty stuff talking about Gainesville. I know that. I was asked to come here and shake you up. I was told that this is bulletproof. But it's not big enough. What the heck? I do this. Well, I've been to Gainesville a few times. They've asked me to come. People ask me when things are looking scary because they want me to help them think about committing suicide. No. And they're trying to do something very interesting there. They have a big landowner called Plum Creek. Plum Creek is the largest real estate investment trust in agricultural lands in America. And they own about 70,000 acres in East Gainesville, East Alachua County. And so they asked me to come out. And they've come up, this is a private sector company that's come up with an idea called Envision Alachua. And they are dead serious about reinventing Gainesville and Alachua County to make it something that is going to be competitive on a global basis. They've actually brought out some folks to Austin, and they're going to be hiring one of our top economic development firms to come back to Alachua County and work with the city, with the university, with the county, to do what? To have a conversation about what to do with the 70,000 acres that they own. They said, we got two choices here. We own the land, it's ours. And so we got a ton of money. They own almost 5 million acres of land across America. We can hire a bunch of lobbyists and lawyers. We can have a conversation with the county and state and city reps. And we can fight until we get what we want. He said, that's not what we want. We want this to be something that the community wants. So let me share with you what they're doing in Gainesville. Run it. It's coming. You know,
Welcome to Envision Alachua. I'm Todd Powell, Senior Director of Real Estate for Plum Creek, the largest private land.
I knew there'd be a problem doing something about Gainesville here.
In Alachua.
Okay, let's stop it. If it's not going to work, let's stop it. That happens. You know, these are good guys, and they're not going to admit it's not going to work, but that's okay. It's not going to work. You keep doing that, we're going to get epilepsy. I encourage all of you to go to this site. It's called Envision Alachua. It's a great video. What I wanted to share with you is the conversation they're having in their community. It starts off with the senior people from Plum Creek talking about their vision, and then they have a facilitator whose job it is to listen to the community. And it's an amazing video because it has people from every single aspect of Gainesville and Alachua County talking about what they want. And they've been actively involved. They're now in their second year of conversations with the community and the university and the private sector about what they want to do with these 70,000 acres and how it will not only improve the community, but be an economic bonanza for that community. And it's led by the private sector. Why is that important? Every place I've been where a city or a community has been able to transform itself, it's been because the private sector has led. Because the private sector is led. And that's what can happen here. So let's talk about Austin. I was born and raised in California, practiced law in California. And I started practicing law representing poor people because I was raised by parents who said that you have a duty to serve, and the best you can do is represent poor people. So I was a legal services attorney representing poor people. And then I had an interesting education. About 85% of my clients said, Attorney Doggett, the one thing we want you to do is to help us find a job. We don't want free legal services. We want to work. We'd like to be able to pay you because then that meant we had a job. And they said, and anybody who tells you that there's something noble about being poor, they're lying. Being poor sucks. We want to work. Can you help me find a job? And I was slow, so it took me 7 years to figure out that maybe they were right. And then I stopped, went back to school, got an MBA, and ever since I've been trying to help people create jobs and create wealth. And I came to Austin by accident in 1989 for a lot of good reasons and fell in love with the place. When I came to Austin, it was pretty pathetic. About 2/3 of the homeowners were underwater. The housing and loan and the savings and loan and banking crisis hit Texas really hard because it hit Texas right after the oil and commodity economy had collapsed in Texas. So a lot of problems. All the major skyscrapers downtown, including the skyscraper next to the Four Seasons, that's connected to the Four Seasons, they were bankrupt. I remember going onto the Four Seasons skyscraper office building, and 1/3 of it was still slab. It had been developed by the Southland Company, the folks who brought us 7-Eleven, and they had gone bankrupt in Dallas, and they hadn't finished the building. And I learned that the first time. You go to an elevator, and it looks like it's closed, and you put your hand in, an electric eye or a little rubber thing stops it. Well, they had run out of money before they put the electric eyes and rubber thingies in it. And so the darn thing closed on my hand, and the elevator started going up. I said, okay. That was Austin. About anywhere between 10 to 15% of the storefronts on Congress Avenue, which goes up to our Capitol, were boarded up. And some of them had been boarded up for 10 to 15 years. And a Stephen S. Austin hotel, which had been one of the iconic hotels, had been boarded up for 20 years. And the conversation that was going on was that if we don't do something in Austin, we're going down. And the area that now is the headquarters of Whole Foods and a lot of other great development was a wasteland, had closed auto dealerships. It was really bad. This was Austin, Texas in 1989. This is what downtown looked like in 1989. And all these buildings that you see were bankrupt in receiverships, all of them. So what do we do? I came, I said, what the heck? I've come to what? I mean, the reason I can afford to be here is because things aren't going very well. I joined the Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Austin Chamber of Commerce, and we joined with visionaries in the private sector, leaders of the university, of the county, the city, and the state government, and we said, we're going to remake this community. We're going to make it. And what we're going to focus on is we're going to make this the greatest place in America to live. We're going to make this a place where you want to go, where you'll be excited of being here. When I came to Austin in 1989, fewer than 100 houses had a market value of $1 million. Today it's 3,000. And how did we do that? We went where people weren't happy and we said, come on over. We had a press conference in the early 90s for the CEO of a business in San Jose that had moved from Silicon Valley to Austin, moved everything. And we asked him, why did you come here? I mean, you're in the middle of Silicon Valley, why come to Austin? And he said, it's real simple. In San Jose, I'm the only one who can afford a house. My senior management cannot afford houses they're renting, and my workers, holy crap, some of them are commuting 2 hours each way because that's all they can afford. When we moved to Austin, every one of my management team and a lot of my supervisors could afford to buy a house immediately. That means something. It helps us attract better people and keep better people. This is what Austin Congress Avenue looks like today. That building, the tall building, is a 52-story condo building. It's the tallest residential building west of the Mississippi. Why it's in Austin, I do not know, because we have a lot of flat land, but there's some people who want to spend a lot of money to look at other buildings. I thought those people only lived in San Francisco and New York. We now have them in Austin. I guess that's what we have them for because the people came from the East and West Coast who just like being in little small places and spending a lot of money for it, but we love it. These are all the buildings that have been built. Remember that other picture? Let me go back. This is the Austin I saw when I came there in '89. This is what Austin looks like now. See all these new buildings? And if I take a picture in 5 years, there'll be twice as many skyscrapers. This city was on the verge of bankruptcy. When I moved to Austin, we had 300 people living downtown. By the end of this decade, we'll have 35,000 people living downtown. There is nothing special about Austin that Tallahassee doesn't have. We are a state capital. We have a great university. We have some water running through us. And yesterday it was 104 degrees. Hot and dry. And we're smack dab in the middle of Texas. Which means we're far away from everything, except Houston and Dallas and San Antonio. You're a hell of a lot closer to the major trading and business locations in the United States than we are. There is no reason that what's going on in Austin, Texas is not going on in Tallahassee. And let me tell you, the folks, you didn't see the video, but the folks in Gainesville, they say, well, the Tallahasseans aren't going to do anything. We're going to do it. And the people in Chattanooga, Texas are saying this, Chattanooga, Tennessee are saying the same thing. We want to be a mini Austin, and guess what? They're now viewed as a mini Austin. It can happen. One of the things we did in Austin is we created a Buy Greater Austin initiative to support local retailers. Put stickers out and had ads and said, if you have a choice, buy from a local retailer. You know, the multinationals that we have here, they're nice people and they employ Austinites, that's fine. But if you have a choice, buy Greater Austin. When we took over an old Air Force base and turned it into our new airport, the city council said, the only businesses that will have concessions in our new airport will be businesses that are local businesses, period. If you're not a local business, don't even apply. They were sued and we won. And so when you go to Austin Airport, the only concessions you see are local businesses. It really makes a difference. And they said, oh, by the way, you can charge only 10% more than you charge outside the airport. We don't want you to rip people off. Probably the biggest thing we did is we came up with a vision about what we wanted to be. And that vision, we wanted to be a place for high tech, which meant there were some requirements. We had to improve our school system, superintendent. We had to improve our community college. Our Austin Community College now has 35,000 students. One of the best and largest community colleges in America. And we had to make a commitment, and this is really important, we had to make a commitment to make people feel comfortable who are coming from other places, whether they're foreign students or immigrants or people immigrating from California, to feel comfortable and wanted in Austin. We've done a good job. But we also were lucky. At the same time we decided we're going to change what we're doing in Austin, California declared war on small and medium-sized businesses and said, we're going to stick you because we know you won't leave because there's no place other than California you want to live. And they've been leaving ever since. There's a ballot initiative that Governor Brown has on the ballot in California that is of great interest to the people of Tallahassee because we're looking at it in Austin. That ballot initiative is to increase taxes on anybody making more than $250,000 a year. Because remember, 1/3 of all Americans on welfare live in California, even though California has only 12% of the people in America. There's a high probability that those folks are going to vote for that ballot initiative, which means there are going to be more small and medium-sized business people who are going to say, all right, that's the last straw, I'm going someplace. And they will go to places that are asking them to come. And if Tallahassee is out there with Austin poaching and talking about why Tallahassee is a great place to live, there's a great probability that you'll get some of those people. If they can get them to go to Boise, Idaho, where their football field is blue, you know, you got to go there and talk to your doctor about getting medication before you watch their football team play. It's crazy stuff. Think about coming to Tallahassee. Now, how did we start this high-tech stuff? We had some very disciplined leaders. And we started with Selectric. Now, you guys, okay, I got a lot of young people here. You don't even know what a typewriter is, right? I have a picture of a typewriter soon, so you'll see what it looks like. You don't know how to use it, but that's another thing. But these are little things before computers, before printers that you use to not write. Okay, that's what typewriters were. We started off making keyboards for that. IBM loved that enough, so why don't you make the whole darn typewriter? Eventually we got into mini computers, and now we have a couple million square feet of of office space for IBM. It started off with selected typewriters. We went again and again to Silicon Valley, and two things happened. We didn't get that many companies moving at the beginning, but they started to hear about Austin, and eventually we got the nickname of being Silicon Hills, which meant that when it was time to compete for coalitions like the Microcomputer Coalition or Semiconductor Manufacturer Coalition, that be the headquarter for America for these groups, it was easier to sell Austin. And we got both of them to come to Austin. They're not there anymore, but they helped put us on the map with a lot of folks in high tech. And we, again, every year, 2 or 3 self-financed trips to the Valley to poach. This is a Selectric typewriter. I know how to use one of those things. I had one of my students say, well, what is that? How does it work? And I had to show her. I said, oh, that's really old. But at the time, it was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and that's what got Austin started as a high-tech company. Dell, which you've heard of, my wife works for, was started by one of our UT students. After he sold $70,000 worth of product out of his dorm room as a freshman, he dropped out and created Dell. They now have revenues over $50 billion. There's nothing about Michael Dell that meant that he could have been born and raised in Austin. Actually, he was born in Houston, but do that in Austin. He could have done that in Tallahassee. He could have been an FSU or FAMU grad. Nobody cared where he was from. They just liked the product. We've also attracted Samsung. They built 2 multi-billion-dollar semiconductor fabs. It's the only place outside of southern South Korea that Samsung has fab, Austin, Texas. Why? Because we told the Koreans, you come here and we'll love you to death. And we have, and they do. They just doubled their fab investment, adding an extra $2 billion 2 years ago. It's a big operation, and we have a lot of Koreans coming to Austin. We have Freescale, which was the semiconductor division of Motorola. It then became Freescale and went public. Then they took it private. They're thinking about taking it public again. But it's another company, global headquarters in Austin, Texas, Fortune 500 company. You're getting Whole Foods. We have Whole Foods. It's an Austin company that was started in 1979 by a couple dropout hippies. In 1981, we had something called the Labor Day flood. It was a massive flood. It killed 18 people. It destroyed their only store. They were such a barely making a business, they had no insurance. They lost $400,000 worth of equipment and goods. And guess what happened? The community and their customers got together and said, we'll make you whole. They chipped in and cleaned the store up. They made contributions, donations to the store so these guys could get back on. And now this building, which is their corporate headquarters, is getting ready to be dwarfed by some new additions. They're going to put a 22-story building behind it because they're growing so much, and they're coming to Tallahassee. It started by hippies in Austin, Texas. By hippies. I've been to Tallahassee. You got some hippies there now. First time I came to Tallahassee was the night before Halloween. Oh, that was a frightening experience. There is nothing Austin has that you can't do. But you guys have to be the leaders of it. So let me end with a couple things, and if you have time for questions, we can ask. The private sector. I have said this all over the world. In every single country, I've almost been arrested, almost been thrown out of countries for saying this. The growth, the engine of economic growth is the private sector. There is no government without the private sector, because without the private sector, there is nothing to tax. And without taxes, there's nothing for government to spend. That is simple. That is the truth. And a lot of people don't want to hear that. You are like Austin is, a state town. You have a state university, you have state universities, and you have the state capital. That is so 20th century. For you to thrive, the private sector has become a greater and greater part of your economy. There is no other way about it, because you've seen the ugly baby math about our debt. It's not just on the federal level. I hear tell that in the state of Florida, they are cutting spending on the state level. Am I right? Because they have no choice. If your economy in Tallahassee is going to grow, if the economy of Florida is going to grow, if the economy of America is going to grow, it's going to grow because of the private sector, supported by public sector leaders who say, we're going to make it as easy as possible for people to do responsible business. That is what has to happen. You have some great universities in Tallahassee. I'm at a university. I have a lot of colleagues who love doing research, and they come up with great stuff. They have absolutely no idea what to do with that stuff when it's done. And some of it could make really great business. You as a chamber and as leaders of government have to be much better connected with what's going on in the research labs of your universities, so that when stuff comes out that can be used by business, it gets commercialized as quickly as possible, because that makes a difference. You want to know what makes Silicon Valley different? It's Stanford University. And the part of Stanford that makes Silicon Valley different is the College of Engineering, because they had a dean right after World War II who said, faculty members, if you want to be successful, you better start a business. And if you don't, you won't get tenure. And if you want to leave to start a business, we'll hold your seat. You can take your grad students, and when you come back, you'll have a place. And unlike many schools, we won't ask you for percents ownership of what you create as a faculty member. You can own 100% of it. All we ask is that you remember us when you're successful. And so they have the Google building. They have the eBay building. They have a whole bunch of buildings that have been financed by their graduates who remember that when they were there, Stanford said, what do we need to do to help you become successful? There's no reason that can't be done in Tallahassee. Chattanooga and Gainesville want to be the next Austin. And quite frankly, they don't care about what Tallahassee wants to do. They're running as fast as they can. If you're going to outrun them, you got to start running. You have a vote coming up to extend your sales tax extension and to have part of it be used for economic development. Part of what we focused on in Austin is infrastructure development and school support. Economic development is also a big part. It's very important from my perspective, looking at you from the outside, that you make sure that in 2019 when you vote on that you get that. Because it's time the fish are cut bait. I'm going to give you another video, and I think this one's going to work, which talks about a city that would love to be in your position.
I got a question for you. What does this city know about luxury? Huh? What does a town that's been to hell and back know about the finer things in life? Well, I'll tell you, more than most. You see, it's the hottest fires that make the hardest steel. Add hard work and conviction, and the know-how that runs generations deep in every last one of us. That's who we are. That's our story. Now, it's probably not the one you've been reading in papers, the one being written by folks who've never even been here and don't know what we're capable of. Because when it comes to luxury, it's as much about where it's from as who it's for. Now, we're from America, but this isn't New York City, or the Windy City, or Sin City, and we're certainly no one's Emerald City.
This is what we do.
Imported from Detroit. God has not blessed Detroit, and the people don't care. I have some students who just graduated from the University of Texas McComb School of Business MBA program who are moving to Detroit. They say, this city is going to turn itself around. If the people of Detroit can hustle, then what can you do, Tallahassee? If the people of Detroit believe it's not over, what excuse do you have, Tallahassee? And if the people of Gainesville can envision a new future, and oh my Lord, I know I don't have to worry about Tallahassee. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I know we've run over time a little, but we started late because of our MC. It's your fault for everything. We did. You know, I was saying I'm going to go through 2 cups of coffee and have to go to the bathroom before he gets finished, but you're really good. And they warned me on the golf course about him, and their wordings were not close enough. But if you have any questions, we have a few minutes for questions before we stop. I'll be glad to answer them if I can. Everybody wants to go outside and throw up now, huh? Yes, sir.
You know, you spoke about commercialization of research at the university, and I just wondered if there's anything you could share with us that would be the most important way to make sure we're connected and how we keep those jobs.
Okay, so the question is commercialization of research. How does that work? If there's anything I can share with you. When I came to Texas, we had a horrible system of commercialization. There are basically three models. There's a Stanford model, which is create it, go out and make it work, and we'll support you. And another extreme is whatever you create on our campus, we own, and we'll control it. And then in between is kind of okay. And we're more at the other extreme. And so we've had to move. What we have done is to substantially reduce the percentage of ownership that the university has. But more importantly, we have an aggressive effort to find out what's going on in the labs. And we have twice a year ready to commercialize seminars for business people where we take what we think are most promising business ideas out of the lab, and we have seminars where the scientists, supported by business students and law students, can talk about why this is useful and how it would work. And we have posters on it, and it really has made a difference. Because the problem is, let me ask a question. How many of you know what research is being done in the Florida State and the FAMU labs right now?
I do.
Yeah, I know. And you also work there, right? Yeah, Larry's we won't talk about Larry right now. But I don't even know everything that's been done at my university. And when you talk about other universities in Texas, I don't know. So the other thing we did, I'm one of the co-founders of something we called Idea to Product Competition. We created a competition for grad students and undergraduates, and now it's global, to take products, the research that's being developed at their university that they think has commercial potential, and the competition is to describe what that research can do if it becomes real products and services, why there's a big market for it, and why you should invest in it. And now we have a global competition. It's in its 11th year. So again, the goal is to get the word out. Nobody knows if you don't tell them. You got great things going on at your universities that nobody knows about. And the chamber can play a major role in making that possible. Okay? Any other questions? Stay back. 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 Yeah, 2 more steps, I know. Any other questions? Okay, real quick one there. Oh, no, not you. That you cannot what? You cannot deficit spend. Same thing in Texas. We've had a balanced budget amendment on our Constitution for years, and every time our legislature is in session, and our legislation by Constitution is only allowed to be in session for 140 days every other year, which is really, I know some of you would like that, right? Which is very interesting, and our legislators get paid $7,000 a year plus per diem, so they all work someplace else, which I think is an interesting model. Remember, I come from California, where they live off of, you know what? The balanced budget amendment is taken very seriously in Texas, and it hurts education. There's no question about it. We're looking at cuts at our university. The percentage of state support for the university system is going down and down and down. Well, what does that mean? That's meant that the private sectors have to step up, and that we at the university have to be much more entrepreneurial. So it's painful, but we're going through a big strategic inflection point, and it's made us healthy and more competitive. When I came to Texas, I heard great stories. University of Texas used to be a place that you went because you wanted to join the right fraternity or sorority. Period. According to James Michener, who spent half of every year in Austin until he passed away, in the early 1960s, the University of Texas Law School, which is now one of the best in America, all you had to do was get in was be white and have a college degree and a 2.0 average. Now it's one of the most competitive law schools in America. So we've had to remake ourselves. And part of it's been the balanced budget amendment, which meant, you know, the one thing we can't do is depend on the state to fill the hole. We got to figure out how to fill it ourselves. We can't fill it ourselves, guess what? We got to cut people. We've been cutting people. Last question, yes, sir.
What did Austin City's county government have to do to aggressively support the private sector?
You know, the question is one of those great questions, so I'm trying to figure out how to say it politely. What did the Austin City and county government do to aggressively support the private sector? This is being taped, so it's going to get home, and I have some friends in the city council, but they know me. Not much initially. In fact, they got in the way. But we had sister cities that said, well, if Austin wants to make it as hard as possible for businesses to do business, we'll make it easy. And I'll give you a perfect example. Dell was in Austin, founded in Austin by a UT dropout. And the city council of Austin was giving great incentives for companies from the outside to come and relocate in Austin. So Michael Dell said to the city council, we're growing like hell. In fact, in the 1990s, their stock went up 87,000% as a publicly traded company. We're growing like hell. We want some of the same incentives so we can be more competitive because we're a global company. And they said, you're here. This is for new companies. He said, no, what did you hear? We're growing like hell. We're growing faster than anybody else in Central Texas, one of the fastest growing companies in the world. We're bringing in people. Their revenue grew by more than 100% a quarter for 8 straight quarters. They were growing so fast that I have a friend who's in a business that owns and buys and sells hotels. Dell was hiring janitors and school teachers to come work for them. That's how fast they're growing. And they went to the city council, and the city council said, you're here, we're not going to give you any incentive. And then a sister city called Round Rock said, we'd be glad to talk. And so Michael went back to city council and said, listen, other people want us. They're going to give us incentives. I want to stay in Austin. And they said, you wouldn't leave Austin. You wouldn't leave. They had people on our city council then, like the people who run California. You're not going to leave. So shut up, boy, and get out of there. He signed a deal with Round Rock, which is in the next county, Hayes County, and he moved. Where he was nothing but fields. Round Rock now has, when he signed a deal with Round Rock, they had about 35,000 people. They now have over 100,000 people. And where Dell is a massive development. And that's happened all around. And when we kept in the city of Austin and Travis County losing businesses to the surrounding communities, we started electing people in city and county government who understood that people in the private sector have choices. And if you kick them hard enough, you know where, they will leave. They will leave. And so, yeah, it's crucial. And we now have a much more responsive local government, and now the partnership's a lot better. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your time. Thank you very much.